Welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast, where we're all about sharing the forbidden secrets and slightly embellished truths about corporate cybersecurity programs. We're ranting, we're raving, and we're telling you the stuff that nobody talks about on their fancy website and trade show giveaways, all to protect you from cyber criminals. And now, here's your hosts, Mike Rotondo, Zach Fuller, and Lauro Chavez.
Hello and welcome to the Cyber Rants Podcast. This is your co-host, Zach Fuller, joined by Mike Rotondo and Lauro Chavez. Today, we are talking about cyber risk assessment season. It's that time of year. We're going to talk about a different take on cyber risk assessment, a more holistic approach with what we call the enterprise cyber risk assessment. So stay tuned. We're going to get deep into that. But first, we're going to kick it off in the usual fashion. Mike?
Hello and welcome to the news. Configuration errors to blame for 80% of ransomware. That's why we do scanning and pen tests. And ECRAs. The vast majority, 80% of ransomware attacks can be traced back to common configuration errors in software devices, according to Microsoft, believe it or not. Reporting focuses on the ransomware as a service, RAS model, which it claims has democratized the ability to launch attacks to groups without sophistication or advanced skills. Some RAS programs now have over 50 affiliate groups on their books. For defenders, a key challenge is ensuring they don't leave systems misconfigured, it added. Ransomware attacks involve a decision based on configurations of networks and differ for each victim, even if the ransomware payload is the same, although each attack is different. Microsoft pointed to missing or misconfigured security products and legacy configurations, enterprise apps, as two key areas of risk exposure. So I guess what they're trying to say is misconfiguration is bad. Escanor malware delivered in weaponized Microsoft Office document. A new remote administration and rat tool advertised in the dark web and Telegram called Escanor. Threat actors offer Android-based and PC-based versions of the rat along with HVNC module and exploit builder to weaponize Microsoft Office and Adobe PDF documents to deliver malicious code. The tool was released for sale this year, initially as a compact HVNC implant, allowing to set up silent remote connections to the victim's computer and later transformed into a full-scale rat with a feature-rich set. Escanor has built a credible reputation in dark web and has over 28,000 subscribers on their Telegram channel. There's also a mobile version of Escanor called Escarat. It's actively used by cyber criminals to attack online banking customers by interception of OTP codes. The tool can be used to collect GPS coordinates of the victim, monitor keystrokes, activate hidden cameras, and browse files on the remote mobile devices to steal data. So we got that going for us. Exploiting stolen sessions cookies to bypass multi-factor MFA. Active adversaries are increasingly exploiting stolen sessions cookies to bypass multi-factor authentication and gain access to corporate resources, according to Sophos. In some cases, the cookie theft itself is a highly targeted attack, with adversaries scraping cookie data from a compromised system with the network and using legitimate executables to disguise the malicious activity. Over the past year, attackers increasingly turned to cookie theft to work around the growing adoption of MFA. Attackers are turning to new and improved versions of information stealing malware like Raccoon Stealer to simplify the process of obtaining authentication cookies. Hackers target, just in time for Labor Day, hackers target hotel and travel companies with fake reservations. A hacker tracked as TA558 is running phishing campaigns that target multiple hotels and firms in the hospitality and travel space, possibly linked to the rebound of tourism after 2 years of COVID-19 restrictions. The threat actor uses a set of 15 distinct malware families, usually remote access Trojans, rats, to gain access to the target systems, perform surveillance, and steal key data, and eventually siphon money from customers. In 2022, TA558 switched from using macro-laced documents in its phishing emails and adopted RAR and ISO file attachments or embedded URLs in the messages. Similar changes have been seen with other threat actors in response to Microsoft's decision to block VBA and XL4 macros in Office, which hackers have historically used for loading, dropping, and installing malware via malicious documents. Disk wiping malware knows no borders. Fortinet identified the ransomware threat that continues to adapt with more variants enabled by ransomware as a service. This destructive threat trends continue to evolve as evidenced by the spread of wiper malware as part of adversary toolkits. They're also targeting MFA, operation technology, and using more reconnaissance of the defense evasion techniques to increase precision and destructive weapons across the cyber attack chain. And lastly, phishing attacks abusing SaaS platforms see a massive 1,100% growth. Threat actors are increasingly abusing legitimate software as a service platforms like website builders and personal branding spaces to create malicious phishing websites that steal login credentials. The advantages of using SaaS for phishing include evading alerts from email security systems, enjoying high availability, and bypassing the need to learn how to code to create websites that appear legitimate. According to a report by Palo Alto Unit number 42, researchers have seen a sharp rise in this abuse, with the data collected by the firm showing a massive 1,100% increase from June 2021 to June 2022. With that, Laura, let's talk about exploits.
Yeah, let's do that. I'm gonna do something for the exploits today that I don't normally do. I'm gonna talk about WordPress.
Yeah, there was a big one in the news that I left off because I figured you might hit it.
So here's the thing: is I'm not gonna get too detailed about the level of exploits and the new one that's out for WordPress. What I'll tell the listeners out there is so if you don't know, WordPress has been around a long time, almost 20 years, right? It's an open source content management solution, so you can use it for web page, blogging, all sorts of stuff, okay? It's open source, so it's written in PHP. It's got a MySQL backend, and I think you can use MariaDB with it too. Here's the thing. Using open source software is a lot like driving down a public street, and people can use the public street just like you can. And so a lot of times you'll be driving down your neighborhood, and what do? You look over and you see someone has stuck out some couches, maybe a couple end tables, maybe like a real nice vase that would look good with some flowers in it. And you're like, man, it's free stuff. You're like, it's free. Like, this guy just put this lazy boy or crier out here. It looks brand new. And you take it home. And next thing you know, you're infested with fleas or bed bugs or something. That's exactly what dealing with WordPress is like. So that while the core product itself doesn't have an entirely overabundance of security flaws, the plugin community really just punches the holes in this product by trying to deliver these capabilities and features for all the users, you out there. And here you go, you download this plugin. The next thing you know, again, you picked up the random sofa off the side of the street, and now you've got a bed bug problem in your home. So keep in mind, when you're using these free open source tools, they're great. Yes, they're good on the budgets, and yes, they give you capabilities without having to spend an entirely overabundance of money. But there's also a trade-off in risk that you take by using these products. And so the two biggest products that are probably some of the riskiest software in the entire world is WordPress and, coincidentally, Microsoft. So remember, try to scrutinize the software that you're using for your business level systems. And it's okay to ask for a budget to buy an industry recognized tool that has native security built in it and won't get you into the situations that WordPress has delivered us into for the last almost 20 years. So Zach, I think that's probably enough lecturing on exploits today. So yes, if you've got WordPress, please check your WordPress plugins. There are about 2,400, 2,400 exploits in total right now for the WordPress community. So with that, Zach, maybe we should talk about the ECRA and why it's important.
I don't know. I want to hear more about WordPress. Tell us how you really feel,
Well, I think if you need help getting budget for a real tool, just have them listen to Laura's rants on WordPress to justify why you need to spend money on, real software.
Yeah. I like to say WordPress is good for one thing, and that's starting a fire in the woods.
Let's do a compilation, a matchup of WordPress and Microsoft rants for the show. But let's dive into it. But before we do, we'll take a quick commercial break.
Want even more Cyber Rants? Be sure to subscribe to the Cyber Rants podcast. Get your copy of our best-selling book, Cyber Rants, on Amazon today. This podcast is brought to you by Silent Sector, the firm dedicated to building world-class cybersecurity programs for mid-market and emerging companies across the U.S. Silent Sector also provides industry-leading penetration tests and cyber risk assessments. Visit silentsector.com and contact us today.
All right, we are back. And guess what time of the year it is? It is cyber risk assessment season. Why do I call it that? Because lots and lots of cyber risk assessments happen late Q3 all the way through Q4, sometimes into early Q1. But it definitely, in our industry, people are assessing risk. They're trying to determine their plans for next year and to create roadmaps and plans of action to move forward. So we're going to take a different spin on it, though. We're going to tell you how you can do it better, more effective, and gain more visibility on your environment and your company as a whole. So my thought, curious to hear you guys' thoughts, but my thought is to start with talking about the different components of a enterprise cyber risk assessment and how they work together, starting with the framework risk assessment, right? So a lot of what we do, of course, is help our clients base their understanding of cyber risk on industry recognized best practices. I don't believe that, I know there are people that do this, but I don't believe it should ever be a make it up as you go approach. I don't think companies should be running off their own proprietary risk assessment methods or frameworks. I think we should follow industry recognized standards, NIST, CIS, ISO, those types. What do you guys think?
Yeah, that would be the logical and reasonable approach.
Well, you see it all the time, where it's, oh, well, this company, this company came in and they did a cyber risk assessment. Great. What framework was it based on? Oh, well, it was their own thing. They had like 15 different things that they looked at. It's like, what? Did you pay for this? So what is this? So I
Hobo
don't know.
sec.
Is there, I mean, maybe there's, it makes sense in some people's minds, but we've talked a lot about frameworks and such in the past, so I won't go into what that is, but I think that's the first kind of overarching piece of what most people call cyber risk assessment, and usually that's where it stops. Is that safe
Yeah,
to say? It's kind of
yeah,
Well,
yeah. They do it.
go
Go
ahead.
ahead, Mike. Yeah, but no, you go. You go.
Well, I was just going to say, we always have these clients that say, well, this guy sold me a tool that checks our compliance. And they run a tool and they give a pretty spreadsheet, and there's really no thought behind it. It's just a randomized report with no human intelligence behind it, and that just doesn't work. You really need a third party to sit through, interview, talk through, walk through all your processes and procedures, explain why they have to happen, and that really is the best way to do a cyber risk assessment from a framework perspective.
I concur. And any auditor that comes in and doesn't want to substantiate a control state by interviewing people, looking at reviewing process documentation, and then actually looking at the technologies in those kind of trifecta of necessity to determine if a control is in place or not. If they're just saying, oh, we can look at a last compliance report and we'll just give you a check mark, be very leery of that, right? Anybody who is worth their weight is going to conduct the risk assessment against an industry recognized framework, and they're going to ask for evidence to substantiate whether or not a control is in place or not. So, like you said, Mike, there's a lot of companies that they'll just run a tool, and the tool can't determine if the documentation states the control is necessary or not necessary, or in what parameters it is or not. And it doesn't look at risk registry files and things like that. So business level risk acceptance, those sorts of things. So it's really a kind of I hate to say it, but it is a half-assed approach to doing a risk assessment. Just out of the box, get some money from you, and don't really give you anything good.
Yeah. Now there's some good tools, like CIS has a tool that will look at the compliance of a specific system and say this adheres to CIS on that level, right? I mean, it's that agent they install, and then there's a centralized, I don't want to get too far into it, but anyway, you get a reporting on whether a specific system is configured to CIS. Those tools are great. Yeah, it's definitely the ones that just run this random. I mean, we've run into it for SOC 2, we've run into it for NIST, we've run into it for PCI, we've run into it for SOX, and it's just like, this stuff makes no sense. I mean, it's a great widget that some venture capital company has pumped a bunch of money into, but in reality, it's not doing you any good. You're just checking a box.
Yeah,
So
don't be lured in by cheaper prices. Unfortunately, I think that's where you start getting into these types of techniques that are used with these tools. So yeah, definitely, Zach. First and foremost is the governance compliance framework risk assessment as part of that ECRA.
yeah,
Yeah, and that's again, most people will stop at the cyber risk assessment piece, and that's common practice. Most organizations will do it annually, or if they're following multiple frameworks, maybe they do it once every 2 or 3 years for a specific framework, and then they're doing other types of analysis in between. Regardless, we believe to really understand cyber risk holistically, you need to take it farther than that. And another one piece that we get a lot of requests for in addition, and it makes sense to do in parallel with the framework risk assessment, are the compliance assessments, right? Obviously, if you're doing a risk assessment and you have HIPAA compliance, you might as well do HIPAA compliance assessment as well. And that way you have a more holistic look at the organization, but you're also determining whether or not you cover down on your compliance requirements. Same thing with PCI, right? The SOC 2, of course, is another example that people will run in parallel with a more holistic framework. So that tends to be an obvious addition. If you're doing your risk assessment, plug in some compliance work as well if you have to do that. Might as well kill two birds with one stone. There's going to be overlap. There's going to be crosswalking between those if you're following an industry recognized framework. Now, so we talk a lot about compliance, don't want to beat a dead horse there, but when we talk about the enterprise cyber risk assessment, as opposed to just a cyber risk assessment, we're looking more holistically. And I see it as there are two primary sides to the coin. It's more like a dice, but I'll talk about it in a coin format first. So we have your paper analysis, you have your interviews, your documentation reviews and such through your framework assessment, your compliance analysis. Then you want to do the technical analysis side too. And that's the first addition that starts to make what you're doing an enterprise cyber risk assessment as opposed to just a framework risk assessment. So with that, pen testing, Laura, Mike, you want to jump in, talk a little bit about the different types of pen testing, what organizations should consider and when they're wrapping this into a more holistic assessment?
Sure. Yeah. So, I think as part of that, enterprise cyber risk assessment, and you're doing the compliance assessment, you're doing, the framework assessment. Like you said, you want to check the technologies, because this is about checking the enterprise and your business systems and all the places that you've got compute essentially, right, for weaknesses, right, for risk essentially. And so the pen tests typically focus on the we have a couple offerings, right, but typically it's the external network fabric. So if you've got offices, or you've got even people working from home, things like that, we're going to want to look at the external network footprint of the services and systems and hosts that are facilitating that, right, the network fabric essentially, and the hosts attached to it. And then we're going to look at the web applications as a secondary layer of that external pen test. And so this will involve your actual web application logic and the code itself. If you've got a web application that has roles and those types of realms inside of it for users to come in and be an admin, or be just a user, or display different types of things, you'll want to do this essentially a gray box, so that we're looking at the web application from an unauthenticated perspective, but then we're also going in and validating that some of the role-based access controls that you've built into the code are in fact functioning as designed, and that data can't arbitrarily be pulled out of an authenticated, elevated realm from just a basic user. And then, so aside from those, the web app and the web app authenticated and that unauthenticated, and then the external black box enterprise network test, we'll typically do an internal network penetration test as well, where in our case, we'll send you a device, you'll plug it into your network, we'll start mapping and reconnaissance the internal pieces. And it's a lot of pen test work. And then so you
have to use our device.
Yeah, you have to use our device. Yeah, we've I don't want to get into the rant here, but we've tried some other options in the past, and let me just tell you, it's a lot easier if you just plug our device in and give us a firewall rule. So it goes a lot faster. But you got that internal penetration test, right? So you've got the external network, external web app, internal network, internal web app that's going to happen as part of that internal test. And then we're going to look at the wireless, if you've got any kind of signal-based, network extensions that you're using in 2.45 gigahertz. We'll do a wireless penetration test. We're kind of discussing the value of those, because we always, like 10 out of 10 times, we'll get victims on wireless interception. Always. It's so, it's one of those kind of arguments where is it better just to tell you how to fix your existing radios and tune them properly and set the necessary configuration, or do you want the test to prove why you need to do these things? But essentially, there's a wireless penetration test in there as well. And then finally, we'll have the physical security assessment penetration test. So we'll come in typically for specific organizations. We don't do this for all of our clients, but there are specific ones that request this. That we'll come in and do a physical penetration test where we'll try to run it in two phases: a passive entry and then a aggressive entry. So day one tests everybody's responses. Day two, tests the guard, specifically the security parameter responses at the location, and then we'll use essentially like a rubber ducky or a similar device to essentially emulate the installation of unauthorized data onto your network. And so those are really, I guess, to sum it up, you got external wireless, you've got your internal pen test, you've got your external pen test with your web app, and complement that with a physical security assessment pen test. Kind of meets that umbrella or that kind of shield-sided part of the penetration test.
Yeah.
So, unfortunately, what we're seeing a lot of people out there that are selling scans, as penetration tests. I've seen this a lot with some of our clients and others that, oh yeah, I got this pen test that, it cost me $2,000 a year, and they pen test me every month. And it's like, no, dude, that's a scam. But it's being sold as a penetration test. So you need to be really clear on what you're getting when you buy a pen test. The least expensive pen test is generally just an automated scan that tells you, all right, here's a bunch of worthless vulnerabilities and here's some critical ones.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and if
so
I could just say, you really need to, man. And if I could take just a moment, Mike, I don't mean to cut you off, but that's a great segue to talk about asking your pen test vendor for their methodology. Like, what methodology are they going to use to conduct their pen test? Because we're all pen testers. We're going to use a scan as part of that reconnaissance portion of reconnaissance phase of the pen test work. So we're going to conduct that scan. But you're right. There's a lot of useless data that's going to come out of that initial scan, and we see a lot of canned pen test reports that are saying, oh, you've got HTTP, you can get the cookie without HTTPS, or you're running TLS1. You're going to get hacked. You're running TLS, version 1.
The birthday attack and the poodle attack and
yeah, the sweet 32. And really, so the difference between, I think what really gives us the mustard over everybody else is that we're going to not put that in the report, for one, but we're going to take the time in the report consultation to explain to you why this didn't make the report, why the scanner believes that this is a vulnerability, why it's really not, right? Why it's a nothing burger. So we're going to talk through that. We're not just going to deliver a scan that says, here, go forth and fix all this stuff that's worthless to you and your time.
Yeah, you really don't want their methodology to be that after Skippy, the intern, gets back from getting my latte at Starbucks, I give him an IP range and he plugs it into the scanner and then kicks out an automated report. That is not the methodology you want to hear.
Yeah, as he farts and giggles while he's doing it. Yeah, you don't want that method.
Well, that's a good method for all those IT professionals out there that have too much time on their hands. If you're one of those, then but actually, I say all those, there's maybe one or two in the entire world. So if you're one of those, if you're one of the elite few that has nothing to do sitting around, hey, get a giant list of vulnerabilities that aren't actually viable attack surfaces and go to work. Have fun with it, Well, so we've covered two sides of the coin, the both governance, the organizational, the reviews, and then also the technical analysis. And now we start to kind of turn it into a dice, the way I see it with the enterprise cyber risk assessment, because there's other things that we can do as well, right? So, for example, and I say we, I mean security professionals, right, can offer out there in the marketplace. But in what we consider a true enterprise cyber risk assessment, with the term we use, there are other components that we can add as needed. So, for instance, open source intelligence, right? A lot of organizations don't understand what is actually out there available about them on the open internet, the just the general public internet, with Boolean searches, with simple tools, stuff like Multigo that aggregates data. You can find all kinds of stuff about your organization that you probably didn't know is out there. I mean, we've had clients that thought their domain registration was hidden, right? And pull that up, right? Just through simple Google Boolean search. We've found organizations that didn't realize they had a web presence on a co-tenant environment with a whole bunch of other platforms that actually introduced some level of risk. I didn't know what those platforms were, right? And so there are tools and methodologies to go about doing that. Likewise, organizations will have their team that are, well-meaning but just uneducated on this stuff, be posting on Instagram and Facebook and Snapchat and all the stuff that the kids are
No,
using
no,
these days.
nobody
TikTok.
uses Facebook anymore. No, it's TikTok
No,
and
no.
Instagram.
Is that
Yeah, come
am
on,
I in the
Boomer.
early
Come
2000s?
on, man.
Early
No,
2000s?
nobody uses Facebook anymore.
I
It's
don't.
essentially
Well,
it's TikTok and Instagram. And
no, Facebook is 55 plus community. Okay, it's not nobody. All right, they need a place to congregate as well. So Facebook
It's like
is
Sun
still
City.
valid, right? Yeah, Sun City, Arizona, Facebook usage is through the roof.
Yeah.
But that being said,
yeah, but you're right.
there are.
Oh, I was going to say that we're always really surprised at the data that we find from some of the employees of what they post, and stuff you wouldn't
Yeah.
even really think of, like, man, I'm proud to get my job today. Check out my new badge, and they're taking pictures of their company badge, and
Yeah.
this goes into the whole phishing and the kind of the next gen that I know Zach's about to talk about. So
Yeah. Well, when you get this information readily available online, I mean, it helps you understand what cyber criminals are going to see when they go looking for the exact same thing. So yeah, absolutely, Laura. It goes into staff awareness training. It goes into social engineering prevention and showing people that, hey, I know you like to share stuff with the world, but here's how it can be used against you. And so once you put something on the internet, it is always on the internet forever. It might look like it goes away, but it is there. So, with exceptions, but
Can't take
the
pee
way
out of a
most
pool.
people post. Yeah, nobody's going to drain the internet, right? So
Yeah.
that's not happening anytime soon, I hope. That being said, another aspect of this is the financial exposure analysis, right? How many organizations actually know what or have an idea of what their cyber risk management program does for them in terms of dollars and cents? Not very many. Most of it look at it as just a necessary cost, kind of a black hole for money, but there are some tremendous benefits in actually taking the time to understand how your cyber risk management program equates to risk in terms of dollars and cents, helps translate the message to the executive team, to the board, to the company in general, right? And you can also start to determine things like, are we insured adequately, right? Based on historical factors, what can we actually expect our insurance to pay out, right? Just because you have a $5 million cyber policy doesn't mean your insurance provider is going to pay you $5 million when you get breached, right? In
Right.
fact, a lot of times they're not even going to cover everything. So you need to understand that, need to understand what amount you're self-insuring in the event of a breach, and then the various factors that are most likely to affect your company and your industry from a financial basis in the event of an attack.
Well, and keep in
yeah,
mind that cyber insurance companies are going to tell you the first person you call is not the technologist, it's the lawyer.
yeah, yeah. And if you're extremely negligent, or they can determine that you've been extremely negligent with implementing risk-based management, you're probably not going to get a payout.
Exactly.
Excellent point. There's another component with all of this that some organizations will do, some will find value, some not so much, but just dark web, deep net research to understand, have you been exposed on the dark web? Is there a breach out there that you don't know about? Is there data out there that you don't know about? And I can pretty much guarantee you there is. So, pretty most anybody listening there, if you don't already know this, there are platforms you can go on like dhashed.io and those that basically scrape the dark web. They look for compromised usernames and passwords and such. So there's a lot of basic information that's readily available from other breaches. And it may not even have been a breach of your system. It could be a third party platform that your employees are using with their company email addresses. And we know how guilty people are of using their same passwords over and over. So an attacker can essentially scrape these lists and then go use them against your own technologies with the hope of getting in. So those are a couple areas. The final one that I can think of off the top of my head is the incident response and disaster recovery tabletop exercises. So this takes it beyond your typical cyber risk assessment, right? And now we're just diving right into, does our incident response plan make sense and does it work in a realistic scenario? Do we have time to share what that looks like, what that process looks like?
Yeah, usually,
Of
of course we do. It involves everybody going, we had no idea.
That's about it.
It does. No, I mean, seriously, it does. So, I mean, I think, we've kind of been doing this for several years now, both for cybersecurity program management and also for the ECRA that we conduct. And when we get the technical teams and the leadership team in the room and we start conducting a real, not a PowerPoint presentation like all the fakers want to do, but a real incident response tabletop exercise, and we start getting into the meat of what's going on, and we start asking questions and turning it back over to the team, there's usually always a look of shock. And I think there's not been a single tabletop exercise we've run with any client ever in the history of doing it silent sector style that has not ended with at least 5 or 6 very good key takeaways where the organization is like, wow, not only do we need to do this again because this is extremely valuable, but now we realize through the scenario, through these exercises, that we also need to work on these 5 areas too. Right. And maybe they find out they need new staff, or, I mean, there's all types of really good information come out of these exercises if they're conducted correctly. And I don't think we've ever had one that didn't just end with just tons of value for not only us, but the clients as well.
Especially not the initial, like, first 1, 2, and 3 one. Those are generally the big ones. By the time, hopefully, I mean, we do it on a quarterly, by the time we get to the 4th one at the end of the year, they should be pretty well ready, although we can continue to throw, scenarios in there, like, a meteor hits your data center. How do you handle that? So, but I mean, they are extremely valuable. A lot of people like them a lot, and it is a great way of finding things that you missed. The big problem is that you'll get some of these clients where one person is the only one that talks. So we had to add a risk factor into ours where we get to knock people out, not literally, but knock people out of the test. So it forces other people other than the main person to talk and think things through. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, that always throws everybody for a loop when we're like, who's your lead technical guy? And they're like, that's him right there. We're like, cool, he has to sit this one out.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, no, we get requests for these quite often as part of the ECRA, and they are absolutely of good value for sure.
Yeah. And they can be fun. Most people think of IRDR exercises as a drag, but they can be made fun for sure. So,
and they can always be made into drinking games.
there you go. If you want to really have fun with it. Well, that's a plausible scenario, right? Your lead technical guy is falling over at the bar and he's getting dragged out by security, right? I mean, that stuff does happen.
And how we simulate that is that while we're in the tabletop exercise, we have you go around, we have you like drink a picture of beer really fast and then run around your chair 3 times and then try to log into the Windows registry to change a specific key.
Yeah.
Okay. Well,
now change the regex value on control set current local machine.
I don't think we've actually done any of that stuff yet, but
you're not on all our meetings.
Who knows? That's true. I miss some things. So
what you guys do in your meetings, you must now take a shot of scotch.
Yeah.
Well, that being said, I think that covers the components really of an enterprise cyber risk assessment. Is there anything that I missed that comes to mind? Any other kind of outliers, things that you could do?
One thing I would say is don't get caught up on the name. I mean, we call it an ECRA, but we've run across people that say, well, that's not an ECRA. And it's like, well, yeah, it is from silent sector perspective. So just be sure what you're getting. Don't just take the name and say, oh, okay, this is covering everything I need to actually identify what components there are in an ECRA. Because if someone comes out and says, yeah, I can do an ECRA for you for $5,000, they're probably not checking everything. So
and it takes 2 days, right?
yeah, exactly.
Don't fall victim for clever language like two people, one cup, stuff like that. Like don't fall victim for those catchy kind of marketing terms that are being thrown around. Mike said, be sure you know what you're getting, right? We call it an enterprise cyber risk assessment because we're looking at all aspects of the business that are going to cause cyber risk, right? From all of your technical assets and a penetration test to the framework assessment for your internal processes and standards that you're using, your people. We're going to do phishing. We're going to do phishing tests to make sure your people are trained against that sort of thing. And we're going to do tabletop exercises to make sure everybody's prepared for when an incident does happen. And if you're not getting all of those things, then you should question that term of what you're being sold.
Yeah, and if it's just like going to put a tool in your environment and run it for 2 days and then spit out a report, that isn't an enterprise cyber risk assessment either. So,
no, certainly not.
Absolutely. Well,
a lot of snake oil out there, Zach. Yeah, that's my final thought. A lot of snake oil.
Yeah.
Yeah, there really is, and that's one of our goals on this is to help educate people on what's going on. Of course, we have our biased opinions about how things should be done, but they're generally right. I would say.
There's a groundbreaking book out there that you can read. I think it's called Cyber Rants. That'll explain all this to you as well.
Exactly. We haven't spent more than 30 years doing this to be like, oh, everybody's got everything perfect today. It's no. There's a reason behind our madness is that we saw too much BS happening in the industry, and we certainly need to cut that line to make it clear for business leaders to make risk-based decisions that matter and that are cost-effective for the budgets that they have.
Yeah.
That's right.
I mean, keep in mind that dinosaurs like Laura and I were around before a lot of this stuff was built. So my first interview was, here's a stack of floppies, build a server. So
yeah. I remember when I had to run out and get 3Com network card, PCMCI network cards, and then had a problem finding the dongles to connect to them. So yeah,
exactly. And if you don't know what a brook trout modem is, then you don't really know communications.
Yeah, if you don't know what Banyan Vines is, don't talk to me.
Well, I think you guys are dating yourselves for the younger generation. Back in my day, we used to be on tablets and didn't have these batteries.
But abacuses are hard to build.
They are very hard to build. Mine kept sliding to the one side.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, that being said, I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Cyber Rants podcast. Hope you found some valuable information here about the enterprise cyber risk assessment approach, a much more holistic approach to the cyber risk assessment. Now, I understand that not everybody has the budget allocated, the ability to do all these things. That's completely understandable, but we want to show you what's out there, what's available. The main thing is doing something's better than doing nothing. So do as much as you can to help your organization thrive, succeed, stay protected. And like Mike mentioned earlier, the book, Cyber Rants. I mean, we've had CIOs that have come back to us and bought copies for their entire IT departments. So we joke about it a lot, but we've had some great feedback about it. So if you read it, we'd love to hear your feedback. Rate it on Amazon, do all that good stuff, and help us spread the word. And make sure you share the podcast. Hope this was valuable, and we will see you on the next episode.
Pick up your copy of the Cyber Rants book on Amazon today. And if you're looking to take your cybersecurity program to the next level, visit us online at www.silentsector.com. Join us next time for another edition of the Cyber Rants podcast.